What you are about to hear is compiled from Delaware County Police Field Reports and a series of log posts on the technical support forum of a major security equipment company. Initially, the incident was considered just a routine customer complaint about a product defect. However, when audio files were extracted from the device's memory card, the case was transferred to the Criminal Investigation Division. The story begins in the autumn of 2020. Sarah and Mark, a young couple in their 30s, had just moved from the cramped city to a spacious two-story house in the quiet suburbs. The house was built in the 80s, situated at the end of an oak-shaded road, about 50 meters from the nearest neighbor. For them, this was the perfect start to raise their firstborn son, baby Leo, just 4 months old. Like any parents with a small child, Sarah and Mark were always in a state of severe sleep deprivation. To catch a few hours of sleep at night with peace of mind, Mark decided to invest a large sum to install the latest generation smart baby monitor system. This device was not just a surveillance camera. It was advertised as integrating artificial intelligence, capable of measuring room temperature, sensitive motion sensors, and high-quality two-way audio features. Mark installed the main transmitter, a small white round camera with infrared lights, right on the rail of baby Leo's crib. The receiver was an app on the couple's phones and a separate monitor placed in their master bedroom, separated from the baby's room by a hallway about 15 meters long. For the first week, everything worked perfectly. The camera's sharpness in night vision mode was very impressive. Sarah could clearly see her son's tiny chest rising and falling regularly through the pale green screen. The motion sensor sent notifications to the phone, even when baby Leo just stirred slightly. That false sense of security made them sleep better, unaware that they had just brought into their home a gateway leading to unexplained events. The first strange incident occurred on the 8th night at 3:15 in the morning. Sarah startled awake, not because of her baby's crying, but because of a strange sound coming from the monitor placed on the nightstand. It was not an alarm sound. It was a burst of static noise, sounding crackly like an old radio tuning frequencies. That sound lasted exactly 10 seconds and then cut off abruptly. Sarah reached out to grab the monitor, squinting at the black and white image transmitting live from the other room. Baby Leo was still sleeping soundly, hand clutching the corner of the blanket. All parameters were normal. Room temperature, 24 degrees Celsius. Humidity, 55%. Probably just a transmission error, Mark mumbled sleepily, seeing his wife sitting up. He explained that the home Wi-Fi might be spotty or suffering interference from other electronic devices. Sarah nodded, put the device down, and tried to go back to sleep. But there was one detail she didn't tell her husband then, a detail that kept her tossing and turning for the next 2 hours. In the moment the screen emitted that crackling static noise, she had seen the status light on the camera via the display switch from green, normal recording mode, to blazing red. In the user manual that Sarah had read carefully, the red light only turns on in one single case: when someone is using the talk feature to transmit audio from outside into the baby's room. But it was 3 in the morning, Mark was sleeping right next to her, and both their phones were in airplane mode on the table. So who or what activated the talk mode in her son's room? The incident that night should have been just a random glitch, but it quickly turned into a terrifying pattern. For the next 5 nights, exactly between 3 and 3:15 in the morning, the monitor screen would automatically light up. It was still that dry hiss, static sound, but Sarah began to notice something different. It was not the steady static of radio waves, white noise. If listened to very carefully in the quiet of the bedroom, that static had a rhythm. It was intermittent, up and down, like the heavy breathing of someone trying to inhale through a damaged lung, amplified through a cheap speaker cone. Mark, with the logical mind of a software engineer, refused to believe in anything supernatural. He spent the entire Sunday reviewing the home network system. In the log exchanged with the technical support team, found in emails later, Mark wrote, "I changed the Wi-Fi password to a random 20-character string. I also switched the monitor's band to 5 gigahertz. to avoid interference from Bluetooth devices or microwaves. But come nightfall, the status light still blinked red. Is my neighbor using a signal jamming device? While Mark was busy with technical solutions, Sarah had to face a more primal fear. She began to feel uncomfortable entering her son's room, even during the day. The room, originally painted in warm, pale yellow, now always brought an unreasonably cold feeling. Every time she stood changing diapers or rocking her baby to sleep, the back of her neck would prickle, a primal bodily reaction warning that someone is watching her from behind. The climax of this escalation took place on Tuesday afternoon, the 12th day after moving in. It was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Sarah was folding clean clothes next to baby Leo's crib. The baby was lying playing obediently, limbs kicking in the air. Suddenly, Sarah heard a very small, mechanical sound. Zzzt, zzzt. It was the sound of the rotating motor of the camera mounted on the crib rail. This camera had a pan tilt feature, allowing users to adjust the viewing angle remotely via a phone app. Sarah froze, the baby undershirt falling from her hand. She slowly raised her head to look at the camera. Its deep black lens was slowly rotating. It was not pointing at baby Leo in the crib. It was rotating horizontally, slowly, until the lens pointed straight at Sarah's face. Sarah stood rooted to the spot, staring blankly into that soulless electronic eye. She knew for certain Mark was at the office, 20 kilometers away. She pulled out her phone to check. The app showed Mark offline since 2 hours ago. So who is controlling the camera? In a split second, the camera's status light flashed a red blink. Then immediately after, it tilted down, returning to its old position, looking at the baby as if nothing had ever happened. Sarah rushed out of the room, snatched up baby Leo, went down to the living room, and sat there until Mark came home from work. She recounted everything in tears, but Mark just sighed, thinking perhaps the motion sensor identified Sarah as an object to track. Tracking mode. Even though this feature was originally turned off to save battery. That night, to reassure his wife, Mark decided to stay up all night to watch the monitor. He wanted to catch this damn technical glitch, red-handed. The clock on the wall inched towards 3 in the morning. The space was absolutely silent. Mark stared at the black and white screen displaying baby Leo sleeping. At exactly 3:07, the screen suddenly lit up brightly, but this time it was no longer static noise. From the speaker, a clear, crystalline sound rang out, shattering the silence of the house. It was a humming sound. Mark sat motionless on the edge of the bed, hands clasped so tightly that his knuckles turned white. Through the small speaker of the monitor device, that sound was not interrupted or static-filled like previous times. It was seamless, low, and carried a clear melody. It was the classic lullaby. Hush, little baby. But the singing voice was not the sweet or soothing voice usually found in mothers. It was a woman's voice, but sounding raspy, trembling, and broken, as if the singer's vocal cords were severely damaged or unused for a long time. Each note stretched out in a dragging, spine-chilling manner. Hush, little baby. Don't say a word, Edge. Sarah, though sleeping, was awakened by that ghostly sound. She shot up, eyes wide with panic, staring at the monitor. In the flickering black and white frame, the crib stood still. Baby Leo lay motionless, but the sound kept echoing in their ears, loud and clear, as if the woman was putting her mouth right up to the camera's microphone and singing. Papa's gonna buy you a mockingbird. Who is in there? Sarah screamed, her voice cracking with fear. Mark didn't answer. He grabbed the flashlight on the nightstand and rushed out of the bedroom. Sarah ran right behind, heart pounding in her chest. The 15-meter hallway connecting the master bedroom and the nursery had never looked so long in their eyes. While running down the hallway, Sarah still heard the singing coming from the monitor she was carrying. The singing continued, steady, unaware or uncaring that the owners were rushing in. Mark slammed his hand on the nursery door, bursting it open. "Stop it right now," Mark shouted, the flashlight beam sweeping across the room. But answering him was absolute silence. The singing died out the very second the door opened. No one was standing by the crib. No one hiding behind the curtains. The window was still shut tight, and the safety latch from the inside was still intact. In the crib, baby Leo was still sleeping soundly, chest rising and falling regularly, completely unawakened by the raspy lullaby just now, or even his father's shout. The room was so quiet that Sarah could hear the heater purring very softly in the corner.
Don't look at it!
Did you hear that?
It's in the crib!
Sarah whispered,
We have to get out
hands
of here.
still gripping the monitor. Mark turned to look at his wife, his face pale under the flashlight beam. He snatched the monitor from her hand. On the screen, the image of the room appeared exactly as their naked eyes were seeing. The couple standing there, bewildered and scared. There was no stranger. Maybe
I don't know what's
it's
happening.
radio interference.
The interference.
Mark tried to
it's
find a
getting
logical
stronger.
explanation, though his voice had no confidence left. Sometimes AM/FM radio waves can be accidentally picked up on the frequency of cheap wireless devices. Maybe we just heard a segment of some late-night radio broadcast. Sarah wanted to believe her husband. She really wanted to believe. But there was one detail that made her stomach knot. She stepped closer to the crib, checking her son. Baby Leo was still warm, skin pink. But when Sarah bent down to kiss her son's forehead to reassure herself, she froze. On baby Leo's pillow, right next to his ear, there was a small indentation. The indentation looked like someone had just rested an elbow there to lean down and watch the child sleep. The pillow fabric at that spot was still warm, while the room temperature was being maintained at 24 degrees. And more terrifying, Sarah smelled a strange scent wafting in the air. Not the smell of baby powder, not the smell of milk, nor the familiar smell of diapers. It was the smell of lilies, the flower often used in funerals, but wilted, mixed with the moldy smell of old earth. That scent existed for only about 10 seconds, then vanished into nothingness, leaving Sarah rooted to the spot in the middle of the room, a cold sensation running down her spine. She turned to look at Mark, intending to speak about the scent, but then stopped. She feared that if she said it, she would have to admit that she wasn't crazy, and that was 1,000 times more terrifying. That night, Sarah carried baby Leo back to sleep in the same bed with the couple. Mark unplugged the monitor system, threw it into the drawer. They thought doing so would end the matter, but they were wrong. That thing didn't need electricity to exist. It was already there. The next morning, the air in the house was heavy as lead. Both Sarah and Mark were haggard from lack of sleep. While Sarah insisted on taking their child to her mother's house in a neighboring state for a few days, while Mark, with the ego of a breadwinner, wanted to find the culprit behind this cruel prank. He was convinced that the system had been hacked. Mark's hypothesis was well-founded. There were hundreds of recorded cases on tech forums about hackers hijacking home security cameras to prank or blackmail young couples. Mark called Kay, an old colleague, now a network security expert for a major financial corporation. Kay arrived at the house at 2 in the afternoon, bringing a specialized laptop and wave detection equipment. They decided to reset the scene. The camera was plugged back in the nursery, which was empty at this time. Kay connected his computer directly to the family's Wi-Fi router to monitor all incoming and outgoing data packets. If anyone from the outside is trying to connect to this camera, Kay said, typing fast on the keyboard, I will catch his IP address immediately. They sat waiting. 1 hour, then 2 hours passed. Nothing unusual. The network traffic chart was flat. But at about 4:30 in the afternoon, as the sunlight began to fade behind the oak trees outside the window, Kay suddenly frowned. He stared at the laptop screen, then looked over at the monitor sitting on the dining table. Mark, come here and look at this. Kay's voice sounded confused. On the log analysis screen, a command line had just appeared. The system recorded that the camera was just activated in event recording mode. Do you see anyone controlling it? Mark asked. No. Kay shook his head, sweat starting to bead on his forehead. No external connection. No strange IP router is completely closed. So why is it recording? Kay swallowed, pointing at the code line. According to the log, the activation command didn't come from the internet. It came from an internal trigger. meaning the camera's sound sensor heard a noise loud enough in the room to automatically start recording. All three, Mark, Sarah, and Kay, turned their heads to look at the stairs leading to the second floor. The nursery was empty. The door was closed tight. There was no one up there. To verify, they decided not to go upstairs immediately, but turned the speaker volume of the monitor in the kitchen to the maximum level. At first, there was only the familiar hissing static noise. But then, a parameter in the right corner of the screen began to jump numbers frantically. It was the room temperature display. The house's central heating system was set fixed at 24 degrees Celsius. The monitor was also displaying this number. Suddenly, the number dropped. 22 degrees, 20 degrees. The sensor is faulty, Mark mumbled, but his eyes never left the screen. 18 degrees, 15 degrees. The rate of temperature drop was unreasonably fast, as if someone had just thrown open a window in the middle of winter, or worse, placed a giant block of ice right next to the camera. 12 degrees, 10 degrees. The temperature stopped at 10 degrees Celsius. In less than 30 seconds, the temperature in the nursery had dropped 14 degrees, a physical impossibility in a room with closed doors and 20-centimeter thick insulated walls. And right when the number hit 10 degrees, that sound rang out again. It was no longer the lullaby. This time it was a creaking sound. A very characteristic sound of wood hitting wood, rhythmic, steady. Creak, crack, creak, crack. Sarah covered her mouth to stop a scream. She recognized that sound immediately. It was the sound of the old oak rocking chair she placed in the corner of the room to sit and nurse her baby. But that chair was very heavy, unable to rock by itself without someone sitting on it and using leg force. "Someone is on it," Kay whispered, his face drained of blood. The sound sensor is reporting rising decibel levels. There is an object moving. But the most terrifying thing was, on the camera screen, the rocking chair stood motionless, not budging at all. The audio system recorded noise. The temperature sensor recorded the cold, but the camera's eye saw nothing. Either the camera was broken, or the thing sitting on that rocking chair had no physical form for the camera to record. Mark couldn't take it anymore. He grabbed the baseball bat kept by the door, signaling Kay to follow him. Sarah was asked to stay in the kitchen, clutching the phone with 911 dialed. The two men crept up the stairs. The creak, creak sound still echoed in their ears, getting clearer the higher they went. The air in the second floor hallway was freezing, even though the heating system was still purring. Mark's breath puffed out as faint white smoke. When they reached baby Leo's room door, the rocking chair sound suddenly stopped. Mark counted to 3, then kicked the door open. The room was empty. The rocking chair stood still in the corner. But when Kay approached and touched the seat cushion, he recoiled his hand immediately. It's so cold, Kay exclaimed. This seat is cold as a block of ice. Mark checked the window, still locked tight. He turned back to look at the camera. The status light was still glowing red, event recording mode. They went back downstairs to review the footage just saved to the memory card. Playback. And this was when they found the evidence that would later cause the police to open an investigation file. In the recorded video, the image of the rocking chair was not standing still, as they saw directly on the monitor, live view. In the playback, the chair was rocking violently, and not only that. At the 14th second of the video, when the chair was rocking hardest, there was a distortion in the image pixels. Glitch. A blurry dark shadow, like accumulated fog, appeared faintly sitting on the chair. It had no clear face, but the sitting posture was very clear. Back hunched, arms hanging down, as if cradling an invisible object in its lap. The shadow sat rocking, then slowly turned its featureless head towards the camera lens. Right at the moment the head turned to look, the video suffered horizontal interference stripes and then cut out. Kay closed the computer, hands trembling as he stuffed it into his backpack.
Listen closely.
"Mark," he said, his voice more serious than ever. "I don't know what this is, but it's not a software error. You should take your wife and child away from here tonight." But they didn't make it in time. The The first blizzard of the season suddenly hit late that afternoon, burying the trail leading to the highway, trapping Mark and Sarah's family in the house with that invisible guest. Kay managed to leave just before the heavy snow fell to take data for analysis at the lab, leaving Sarah and Mark completely isolated in the house amidst the storm. Power outage. The whole area plunged into darkness at 6 in the evening. Mark activated the gasoline backup generator, but it was only enough to maintain the heating system at a minimum and a few light bulbs on the ground floor. To ensure safety, they decided to move all bedding down to the living room, placing baby Leo to sleep in a portable crib right next to the sofa where the couple kept watch. However, the monitor screen, the thing running on rechargeable batteries, was still placed by Sarah on the coffee table. She didn't dare look at it, but also didn't dare turn it off. She needed to know what that thing was doing on the second floor. The camera in the nursery, still working thanks to integrated backup battery, was transmitting images of the empty, pitch-black room, only dimly lit by infrared light. At 9:30 p.m., Mark was rechecking the ground floor windows when Sarah screamed, hand clamping her mouth. Mark rushed over. On the tiny monitor screen, they saw it. The room upstairs was completely empty. Baby Leo was lying right next to them in the living room. But on the screen, the blurry dark shadow they saw in the footage this afternoon had returned. It was standing next to the empty crib upstairs. The shadow had the shape of a woman wearing a long dress, hair disheveled and hanging down. She was bending down over the empty crib, hand rocking gently as if soothing an invisible child. The movement was slow, affectionate in a spine-chilling way. "It thinks our baby is still up there," Sarah whispered, tears welling up. Right at that moment, the shadow stopped. It slowly raised its head, and this time, even though the black and white image was very blurry, Mark swore he saw it looking straight at the camera. It knew they were watching. And then, a wide grin split across that blurry face. The infrared light on the camera snapped off. The screen went pitch black. Mark couldn't take it anymore. This blatant violation turned the fear inside him into the frenzied rage of a father. "I'm going up there to smash that camera," Mark growled, grabbing the baseball bat. "If there is no camera, it will have no portal to communicate." Yum. Don't leave me alone," Sarah begged. "I'll only be 2 minutes. Stay here with the baby." Mark rushed up the stairs, the thumping footsteps echoing in the silent house. Sarah sat huddled in the living room, eyes glued to the monitor screen to watch her husband. On the screen, she saw the nursery door burst open. Mark stepped in, flashlight sweeping wildly. The dark shadow by the crib had disappeared the moment Mark burst in. Sarah saw her husband approaching the camera mounted on the crib, raising his hand to rip it down. But the moment Mark's hand touched the device, a sound emitted from the monitor downstairs, where Sarah was holding it, freezing the blood in her body. It was not singing. It was a hoarse, murky voice, sounding like gravel grinding together. "It's cold." Sarah was stunned. That voice came from the monitor speaker, but Mark upstairs, standing next to the recording microphone, did not move his lips at all. "Cover it with a blanket." Mark on the screen seemed to sense something too. He stood frozen, hands still gripping the camera, head tilted as if listening to a whisper right by his ear. Later, Mark recounted that at that moment he didn't hear the voice through the speaker, like Sarah. What he heard was a direct whisper right behind his nape, breathing a jet of freezing cold air onto his neck. "Don't take it away, I'm not finished playing." Down in the living room, terror caused Sarah to lose control. In extreme panic, she did something she would regret for the rest of her life. She pressed and held the talk button on the monitor screen. "Who are you? What do you want? Leave my family alone!" Sarah screamed into the device. Her scream echoed through the camera speaker on the second floor, where Mark was standing. That action was like throwing a rock into a hornet's nest. As soon as Sarah stopped speaking, the monitor screen vibrated violently in her hands. A response sound rang out, not human, but a screech at such high frequency that the water glass on the coffee table cracked open. "Crib!" The lights in the living room flickered continuously, then went out completely. The generator died. Mark! Sarah screamed in the darkness. I'm coming down! Mark's voice echoed from the stairs, accompanied by hurried running footsteps. But then another sound rang out, drowning out everything. It was baby Leo's screaming cry. Sarah fumbled in the darkness, rushing towards the portable crib placed next to the sofa. Mommy's here, Leo. Her hand touched the inside of the crib. Empty. Sarah's heart stopped for a beat. She frantically groped all over the crib, then down to the floor, hoping her child had just rolled out. But there was nothing. And then baby Leo's cry rang out again. But it didn't come from the ground. It came from the monitor screen, the only thing still dimly glowing in the pitch-black room. The cry echoed from the speaker, accompanied by hissing, static. Baby Leo was on the second floor. Somehow, in the 30 seconds when the lights were out, the baby was taken from the crib right next to Sarah and brought back to the haunted room upstairs. Baby Leo's cry tore through the silent night, but it didn't echo down from the stairs, but came buzzing through the small speaker in Sarah's hand. Mark almost slipped while rushing down the last steps, crashing into Sarah, who was collapsing on the living room floor. Without a word of explanation, both husband and wife, with survival instincts rising stronger than ever, rushed back up to the second floor together. The upper hallway was freezing, a bone-chilling cold that caused their breath to condense into thick clouds of mist. When arriving at baby Leo's door, Mark turned the doorknob. "It's jammed!" Mark roared, slamming his whole body against the thick oak door. But the door, which normally opened with a light push, was now rigid, as if welded to the frame from the inside. From inside the room, baby Leo's crying suddenly turned into a choking sob, then went silent. Instead, there was the frenzied creak sound of the wooden crib slamming hard against the floor. "Leo, open the door!" Sarah screamed, banging her hands on the wood. While Mark stepped back to gain momentum to break the door, Sarah, trembling, opened the camera app on her phone, the only device still connected to the inside. What appeared on the tiny phone screen made Sarah collapse to the hallway floor. In the ghostly pale green infrared light, the wooden crib, weighing nearly 20 kilos, was shaking violently, as if in the center of a local earthquake. But most horrifying of all, baby Leo was not in the crib. The boy was floating in mid-air, about 5 centimeters above the mattress surface. Leo's tiny body was rigid, arms hanging down, as if a pair of invisible hands were lifting him up from under the armpits. And through the phone speaker, the lullaby rang out again, but this time it was no longer slow. It was fast, shrieking, distorted and angry. "Hush, little baby, don't say a word. Hush, little baby, don't say a word." The song repeated like a broken record, getting louder and louder, drowning out the sound of Mark banging on the door. "Get back!" Mark let out a final roar, throwing his entire 90-kilo body weight into his right shoulder and slamming straight into the door. Slam! The door latch shattered. The door flew open, slamming hard against the wall. The moment Mark and Sarah burst into the room, all chaotic sounds died out. The singing vanished. The crib stopped shaking immediately. Baby Leo dropped onto the crib mattress from his floating height, bursting into a scream. The cry of life, of real fear, dispelled the suffocating supernatural atmosphere in the room. Sarah rushed over to hug her child, wrapping the baby tight in her arms. She checked all over her child, tears streaming down her face. Mark stood shielding the mother and child, baseball bat ready in hand, eyes staring glaringly at the empty space in the corner, where the rocking chair was still swaying gently from inertia. "We're leaving right now," Mark ordered, voice trembling but firm. 15 minutes later, police cars and ambulances pulled up in front of their house. Red and blue beacon lights swept across the ancient oak trees, creating bizarre dancing shadows on the snow. In the Delaware County Police Field Report recorded at 11:45 at night, the incident was classified under suspected burglary and child abuse. Police found no signs of forced entry or footprints in the snow around the house, except for the tracks of the host family. However, the physical evidence on baby Leo's body was undeniable. On the child's tender left upper arm, a dark purple bruise stood out clearly. The bruise had the shape of 3 slender fingers, imprinted deep into the flesh. The strange thing lay in the size of these fingers. Medical staff noted, the mark shows this hand has fingers about 30% longer than a normal person, and the impact force was extreme, yet caused no fractures, only subcutaneous hematoma. The police seized the entire camera system, memory cards, and Wi-Fi router as evidence, suspecting this was a sophisticated abuse case or a sick prank by someone hiding in the house beforehand. But they never found that intruder. Sarah and Mark's family never returned to that house again. They accepted selling the house at a huge loss after leaving it empty for 6 months. The case gradually hit a dead end and was filed in the archives labeled cold case. However, the real story lay in the digital report that Kay, the cybersecurity expert friend, secretly made and sent privately to Mark 3 months later. When Kay thoroughly analyzed the audio file recorded on the night of the incident, he discovered a detail that would make anyone hearing it feel a chill down their spine. Beneath the hissing static and the distorted lullaby, there was another layer of sound, at 18 Hz, infrasound, a threshold the human ear cannot hear, but can cause fear, nausea, and hallucinations. When Kay used specialized software to pitch shift this sound layer up to an audible level, it was not meaningless noise. It was a voice completely different from the lullaby. It was old, weary, and echoing as if coming from a deep well. The tape recorded the phrase repeating over and over, "Don't let him grow up. Don't let him grow up like the boy." Mark later investigated the house's history through archives at the town library. He discovered that in 1982, the former owner of the house was a woman named Eleanor. She went mad and committed suicide in the very west bedroom, baby Leo's room, after her 3-year-old son died from an unexplained accident right in the old crib. The name Eleanor in ancient Hebrew means "God is my light." But for Mark's family, that name was forever linked to darkness. To this day, the house continues to change owners constantly. New tenants often complained on local forums about electronic systems in the house breaking down frequently. And sometimes, on quiet nights at 3 in the morning, they heard smart speakers like Alexa or Google Home turning on automatically and playing an old lullaby, even though no one gave a command. "Hush, little baby, don't say a word.